we've brushed over so much here. Just from a time point of view, we might have to have a volume 2. Notably your international career, notably some of your coaching career, but I think some of it will come out now. So I just wanted to speak about coach education or coach development, really. So you became full-time with the FA in 96, 97, is that right?
I joined full-time in 98 officially. I had a heavy involvement from about 94 part-time, which grew.
So what kind of prompted you to put together or put in place a kind of goalkeeping coach education system? Because the reason I asked the question is, we've got one of the most established and advanced and thorough goalkeeping coach education programs around. What prompted you to put that in place, and tell us a little bit about how you did it?
Yeah, I think my early experience of Lilleshall, round about 93, 90, I retired in 93. So started working at Lilleshall 93, 94, a couple of days a week, working with the likes of Keith Blunt, obviously on a full-time basis, John Peacock, who was a mentor for me, really. He was the sort of he was my staff coach when I did my advanced license. People like Alex Gibson, Martin Hunter, Les Reed were all part of the FA at that time. But I think the day-to-day with Keith Blunt and seeing how he saw the game, that gave me a real interest. I then started helping with the development programs, which was similar to the camps you run now, Tim, but this was for age groups. So working with the likes of John on a regular basis. And I just think I started to get the coaching bug, but there was nothing there for goalkeeping. So when Ray, I think Ray joined the FA.
Ray Clements.
Yeah, Ray Clements joined the FA with Glenn Hoddle. And then when Glenn left, Ray came into the technical department. So for a period of a couple of years, I'd been thinking about really what should be established in terms of goalkeeping coaching. As I say, by this time, I had a massive library from all over the world of not so much how other countries do it, but certainly how other goalkeepers see goalkeeping. And then Howard was in charge, Howard Wilkinson, and he basically called me and Clem together and said, how do you see the future? And I said to Clem, I do think we need to establish a coach education program. And what we did, we got all the goalkeeping coaches who were working at the very top end of the game initially. So the likes of Joe Corrigan, Bob Wilson, Roy Tanks, Paul Barron, Eric Steele, Eddie Needsvicky. Apologies if I've missed anyone. There was about Steve Gruzovic, Mervyn Day. Yeah. So they were all established goalkeeping coaches, but they were all advanced license holders as well.
Okay.
So they'd all gone through the coach education program, and we got them all together up in Manchester, and we said, look, this is what we want to do. What do you think is important? And we got a lot of information. We had a blank sheet of paper. Myself and Clem had already discussed what we thought was the way. Discussion, debate, people of different opinions, some saying they think all goalkeeping coaches need to go down the mainstream pathway. They need to become A-licensed coaches before specialising in goalkeeping. Other coaches said no, and a little bit of debate, but we had an opportunity to put a program in place. But the one thing Howard wanted was it to be built from top down. So we introduced the A license as the first course, which probably isn't the best way to build it, but he wanted it to have an impact. So we built it from A license, and then 18 months later, B license, and then 18 months later, level 2, and 18 months later, level 1. So, but time we got to 2004, we had a full complement of courses at 4 levels. So it was great doing it because there was nothing in place. So we didn't have to dismantle anything or amend it or dilute it. We basically went with what our gut feeling was, but also the feeling of very experienced people who have been in the game a long, long time.
Yeah, and what I can imagine how rewarding that process was, and insightful as well. The amount of people you had involved. What benefits or what results did you see straight away, or quite early on in its first few years?
I think initially there was some opposition from predominantly the professional game, because for some, obviously I wouldn't name them, but for some established goalkeepers, they were, well, I played 500 games. Why do I need to do a coaching qualification? Yeah. But what we did, we made it, I think we made it as interactive as possible in terms of everybody contributing. So we had that group of goalkeeping coaches who were established goalkeeping coaches within performance, working day to day, obviously come a Saturday. But what we also did, we did a course for goalkeepers who were just coming to the back end of their careers and hadn't yet started on the coaching pathway. So David Seaman, Chris Woods, Tony Coton, sort of players of that ilk, and we brought them to Lilleshall, and we had a couple of days with them, and also with them, and said, what do you think? What would be your reservations? What are the challenges for you moving forward? Obviously, Tony did become a coach, and Woodsy, and of course Woodsy is now, working with the international teams, which is good that he's still involved. So I think what it did, we had the observations from everyone, but the one thing I've learned, especially with working at the FA for what is full-time 22 years now, is that ultimately you need to make a decision. And, Ray was full-time at the FA for 13 years, and he was always in a great position and would go and fight, whether it was with regard budgets or reporting to the professional game. He was far more comfortable in that environment than me. He the way he could affect the decision makers, and I was quite happy just to build a program. And I think we worked together for 13 years, and obviously since then, Tony Parks come on board, Simon Smith came on board, and obviously yourself, Tim, and it's where we are today.
Yeah, here we are. So from that first course, that A license back in early 2000, what changes, what developments have you seen? What are some of the different pressures or demands on goalkeeping coaches now? What are you seeing over that kind of coming up to 20-year period?
Oh, it's just so different, because then we were still in an era of still a lot of clubs. The goalkeeping coach would turn up with his bag of balls in his boot, would literally turn up at 10 o'clock for a 10:15 session, would work the goalkeepers for 2 hours and then get back in the car and be off. So it was very much sort of freelance. Each club would normally only have one goalkeeping coach. When you look at the bigger clubs now, they're running with 3-4 coaches. It is now full time. It is now a 7-day week, whereas it wouldn't have been then, even if you were full time in a club. You either played on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, and you played on a Saturday. now you can literally have fixtures every single day, probably other than a Thursday, maybe Friday. But yeah, Saturday, all the academy games on a Sunday, 23s on a Monday. The goalkeeping coaches now have got to be far more skilled in terms of managing difference. They could end up having a 37-year-old first team goalkeeper, and at the same time having a 17-year-old in the same group. They could end up having 2 goalkeepers, 5 goalkeepers on any particular day. I think probably the working with the amount of staff is now so much harder, because when it first started, you would work with a head coach or the assistant coach, and that would be it. But now, you do have the input of maybe even more coaches, 2 assistant coaches, definitely S&C, and people involved in that sort of 4-corner development. So I think now the coaches have got to have they've got to have a far greater skill set, and to do that, they probably need help and the training to be able to do that. And I think that's the way the courses have gone. I think when they started, they were very tech-tac, a little bit on the physical, not a great deal on the psychosocial. But I think over the 22 years, definitely at level 3 and level 4, they are far more user-friendly to the day-to-day role of the goalkeeper, working within EPPP or within senior goalkeeping, or working within development. I would say that's the biggest changes. Yeah.
And then what would you say? What would you say are some of the most important attributes or characteristics of a effective goalkeeping coach now? What do they need?
I think the easier part is dealing with the goalkeepers. I think the biggest challenges that they now face in terms of maybe affecting and influencing the other staff. I'm nearly 61 and I'm a grumpy old man, Tim, and I do have just a couple of issues, with, and it's only chatting to goalkeeping coaches as well, is in terms of how do they actually influence head coaches and assistant coaches. And one of the things I do see, when I go around the clubs, the dimensions of practices don't lend themselves a lot at times to decision making. So they'll go through appropriate size practice with the goalkeepers and end up joining in a possession practice that is played on a postage stamp, which has no relation to what they're going to face on a Saturday. Yeah. And there's the same thing with regard decision making. If you want goalkeepers to make good decisions about defending the space in the area, make sure that they're on them spaces. Yeah. If you're going to stick them in practices which are reduced because of an influence, sometimes an outside influence of maybe somebody involved in S&C in sports science are saying, no, we need to reduce the areas because of the workload. I'm saying, no, increase the size of the area and decrease the duration, the timings reduced, because we still got to have goalkeepers actually practicing what they do on a Saturday, and that's playing on bigger areas.
And go on, Sam. Sorry.
And I do think it's it doesn't only affect the goalkeeper, Tim. I think people say, defending isn't what it is. But, day to day, I would pose a question: how often do the defenders need to defend on big areas like they do on a match day? And if they're not doing it every day, then they will get exposed. So I do think it's twofold. But that is just one instance of how I think we we could sort of help the goalkeepers, because some of the young goalkeeping coaches, they can't influence, or in no position to influence, assistant coaches and head coaches, so how they build that relationship. It's difficult.
And I think that example there, Tomo, takes us back brilliantly to some of your first experiences in more professional football around. It was a game. It was on big areas. There was challenges around it. You were against multiple opponents of different ages and experiences, and just setting that environment and that kind of that setup, gives you so many benefits. And I think it was one of my first questions around, like, what benefits does it give you, and what are you missing out on? And I think or us as coaches have got to make sure we've got the principles right at the base of it, and maybe some of the more detailed or specific stuff can take place, on top of them, but they shouldn't replace them.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So what's next then? What's next for goalkeeping coaches? What do we need to be ready for?
Oh, what do we need to be ready for? Hopefully,
all goalkeepers.
No more changes in the rules. I think that would be a start. I think, will the game go full circle? No, but I do think the game will change. I think it's heavily related now to possession, and we do have this about building up, and building up from the back, and it's. I think there is a risk and reward with it, and I think we just got to be a little bit careful. We don't stay there too long, because I think what we have got to produce as well is goalkeepers that are not forced to, well, this is our philosophy. We always build, so, rolling the ball, or passing a short ball, 10 yards, 15 yards, and it's just become a possession, and this is how we build. I think we still got to have goalkeepers that basically deal with where's the space. So identify when the press is on, and if the press is on, having the ability to play. But I think to do that, the mid-range passing is probably the one area that sorts the good ones out from the very good.
Yeah,
the ones who can break the lines, by passing through and break the lines of the opposition and take people out of the game. The goalkeepers that can play over those mid-ranges of those 40-yard passes, but play with quality and variation, and be able to play the ball a little bit flatter. But then having the passing ability to exploit the opposition, down the sides. And we have seen a trend, over the last maybe 10 years in the profile of front players. But now all of a sudden you get, the likes of Calvert-Lewin, who offers something else now. Somebody who is definitely a physical specimen, is only going to get better and stronger, and a very talented footballer. But all of a sudden, this year has been a real threat. And, the goal that he scored in the derby. So, there will be a time where I think maybe that target man type profile might be an alternative. So it will not always be, Tim, about building from the goalkeeper and 14 passes before you get to the mid-third, and I think the goalkeeping coaches have got to be ready for that.
Yeah, great advice. And then what about for goalkeepers? What do you think's next for goalkeepers? What do they need to be ready for, and how do they adapt to whatever's next?
Yeah, well, we do know that the game's getting quicker. It might be something to do also with it, that they now play on grass. They don't play on mud and sand anymore. The pitches are obviously quicker. The game is quicker. When you look at all the data, certainly for the top end of the game, in terms of one-touch finishing would be a good example. at the very top end, you could be talking to 75% one-touch finishing, which basically means the goalkeepers had to move from where the ball was originally. So the importance of speed around the goal, I think the laboured goalkeeper being selected because he's 6'4", 6'5" at the very top end of football has gone. I don't think size is as much of an issue now, but what is an issue is speed. So speed in the goal, in terms of reactive speed, because of the amount of one-touch finishes, speed around the goal to get from A to B, and then speed from the goal, and it's the decision-making. And we're seeing some examples now, last weekend in the Premier League, 41 goals getting scored on a weekend. The game is so open now that the goalkeepers have got so much responsibility in terms of organising the team in the event of transition. So that's not on transition, because if it's on transition, it's too late.
Too late, yeah.
So it's got to be the goalkeeper's understanding in terms of what the team shape needs to be to ensure that if the ball is lost, that they're in balance. So I think probably the profile of the goalkeeper, definitely for me, would be, if I was looking for young goalkeepers now, speed of thought, speed of their decision making, and basically their speed in the goal, around the goal, and from the goal would be out of possession. And then in possession, you need somebody who's a footballer. So it's a right mixed bag, really. And probably the other thing, Tim, a heart as big as a dustbin lid, because we all see goalkeepers going through, with the likes of social media. You got to have a thick skin, and you need to be cut out for it, so you can be the most technically effective, tactically aware. But if you're not of the mentality, in terms of the robustness and the physical robustness of what you need to be today to be able to play the game at the highest level.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, on that saying of a heart the size of the dustbin lid, I'd just like to say thanks for how you've shared your journey, who you are, how you've played. Personally, I'd like to add the influence that you've had on many, many people, thousands and thousands of people across the UK and globally, and especially myself. I think having a heart the size of a dustbin lid definitely sums you up as well, mate. So thank you for that. And I think you've shared some amazing stuff. So that just remains one last thing to do, which is 4 quick fire questions, if that's all right, which should just close us off.
Okay,
Don't think about them too long. Just give us your first thing that comes into your mind. So first one, favorite training session.
Favorite training session, any shooting practice. The more competitive, the better.
Nice. Superstitions as a player.
Superstitions, always like my gloves washed, dry, and everything perfect.
Favorite goalkeeper of all time.
Early days, Peter Shilton. Later days, Peter Schmeichel.
And biggest footballing influence.
I've got to say probably my father and my brother, because I don't think I would have had the mentality I had if it wasn't for them.
Brilliant. Tomo, thank you very much for your time this morning. I think amazing for so many different people, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've shared.
No problem at all, Tim. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and all the very best.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. Take care.
Thanks, Tim. Bye now.
Bye now. Bye.